Welcome to the infamous edition of the Headstones and Microphones, where we use AI to step into the past through a researched first-person simulation done through creative storytelling of history's most infamous people. Now, let's meet our guest. Welcome to the podcast. Let's start at the absolute beginning, where the public narrative hasn't yet distorted who you were. When and where were you born, and what was your given name?
Hi, Calvin. I was born right in Manhattan, New York City, on June 11, 1943. My given name was Henry John Hill Jr.
What was your hometown and home life like as a child?
We moved over to a working-class neighborhood in Brooklyn, which is where I really grew up. Home life was crowded and hectic. My father was a hard-working Irish immigrant who broke his back as an electrician, and my mother was Sicilian. I had a big family, several brothers and sisters, and we didn't have much money. The neighborhood itself was completely dominated by the Lucchese crime family, and that environment definitely shaped everything around us.
Was there a story behind your name or a nickname that stuck with you?
Most people just called me Henry, but depending on who you talked to or what part of my life you were looking at, I went by aliases like Alex Canclini when I needed to keep a low profile, or simply Mr. Hill when things got formal.
What were you like as a child, and how many years of schooling did you actually attend?
Man, by the time I was 11 or 12 years old, in 1955, I was completely transfixed by the mobsters in my neighborhood. They had the silk suits, the diamond rings, the Cadillacs, and all the respect. I started ditching school to hang around a livery cab stand across the street from my house, running errands for the local Vario crew. My parents thought I just had a regular part-time job at first, but once my dad found out I was playing hooky and working for wise guys, he tried to beat it out of me. It didn't work. I completely abandoned my education early on to learn the rules of the street instead.
What's a decision that changed everything for you but felt small at the time?
It was walking across the street to that cab stand to ask for a job when I was 11. To an ordinary kid, it just looked like a way to earn a few bucks and stay busy. But the moment I stepped inside, I was working for Tutty Cicero, Paul Vario's brother. That small decision completely altered the trajectory of my life and set me on the path to becoming a full-time racketeer.
Let's talk about your early run-ins with the law. Before the world knew your name for your most infamous actions, what was your very first arrest or interaction with law enforcement, and what were the consequences?
I was 16 years old. A buddy of mine named Lenny and I tried to use a stolen credit card to buy a set of snow tires for Tutty Cicero's wife. The detectives caught up with us right when we got back to the cab stand. They took me in and gave me a pretty rough interrogation, but I kept my mouth shut and only gave them my name. Paul Vario's lawyer rushed down and bailed me out, and I ended up with a suspended sentence. But the real consequence? My refusal to talk earned me massive respect from Paul Vario and Jimmy Burke. They saw I could keep a secret, and that opened the inner doors for me.
At what moment did you realize your name would never be forgotten?
That would have to be when the Lufthansa heist hit the national news back in December of 1978. We walked out of Kennedy Airport with $5.8 million in cash and jewels, the largest unrecovered cash robbery in U.S. history at the time. The sheer media frenzy surrounding that robbery and the trail of dead bodies that Jimmy Burke started leaving behind to cover his tracks made it very clear that this wasn't just another local score. We were in the big leagues, and the whole country was watching.
Did fame make you more dangerous, or did it simply expose who you already were?
It wasn't so much fame as it was the escalation of the lifestyle and the paranoia that came with it. I had been heavily involved in arson, hijacking trucks, and running stolen car rings all through the 60s and 70s. But by the late 70s, I was deeply involved in massive drug trafficking networks, dealing cocaine and meth. The money and the constant threat of prison or a bullet didn't change my nature. It just amplified the desperation and exposed the length I would go to survive.
Who do you believe betrayed you first? A person, society, or your own instincts?
It was a mix of my own instincts and Jimmy Burke. My instincts told me to get heavily into the drug business, even though Paul Vario had strictly forbidden anyone in his crew from dealing narcotics because of the heavy prison sentences. But the ultimate betrayal came from the inside. After the Lufthansa heist, Jimmy went completely paranoid. He started whacking everyone who had anything to do with the robbery, so he wouldn't have to share the money or risk someone talking. When I realized Jimmy was setting me up to be murdered next, I knew the code of silence was completely dead.
What was your most unique habit or a random fact about you that would surprise people?
People might find it strange considering the life I led, but even when things were chaotic, I was an absolute fanatic about cooking. Even when I was locked up in federal prison at Lewisburg in the 70s, I managed to get onto kitchen detail. I'd hustle surplus food, loan shark pay advances to other inmates, and cook up elaborate Italian meals with smuggled ingredients right there in the cell block.
What did the public never understand about the pressure you were under at the time?
They see the glitz and the money, but they don't see the crushing paranoia. By 1980, I was a severe drug addict, staying awake for days, constantly looking over my shoulder. I knew the FBI was closing in on my drug operation, and at the exact same time, I knew my closest friends in the mob were planning to put a bullet in the back of my head. You are trapped in a vice between the government and the executioner, and the pressure is completely suffocating.
Did you have any known rivalries that defined your career?
Our rivalries weren't usually with law enforcement. They were internal or with other crews. One major mess happened in 1970 with William Billy Bats Bentvina, a made man in the Gambino family. He came home from prison and insulted Tommy DeSimone at my restaurant, The Sweet, telling him to shine his shoes like he used to. Tommy lost his mind. Tommy, Jimmy Burke, and I ambushed Bats, pistol whipped him, and we had to drive his body upstate to bury it. Because he was a made guy, if the Gambinos ever found out we did it, we were dead meat. That rivalry cost Tommy his life a few years later.
What personal battles were you fighting privately while the world was watching?
My biggest private battle was a severe, spiraling addiction to narcotics, especially cocaine. I was also dealing with the chaotic fallout of my marriage to Karen, who almost killed me at one point because of my blatant affairs. I was running around trying to maintain the illusion of a wealthy, untouchable wise guy while completely falling apart physically and mentally from the drugs and the stress.
What was your darkest moment, and was there ever a time you wanted to walk away from it all?
My darkest moment was right after my narcotics arrest in May of 1980. Karen had flushed $60,000 worth of cocaine down the toilet during the raid, leaving us completely broke. When I got out on bail, Paul Vario handed me $3,200 and completely turned his back on me. Then I met Jimmy Burke at a diner, and he tried to get me to travel down to Florida to do a hit. I knew right then and there it was a setup to whack me. I was completely alone, abandoned by the family I gave 25 years to, and staring down a death sentence from my best friend.
What truth was hardest to escape when you were alone at night?
The hardest truth was realizing that everything I built my life on, loyalty, honor among thieves, the family, was a total lie. When the chips are down, there is no loyalty. It's every man for himself, and the very people you called brothers will dig your grave without blinking an eye.
When the law finally closed in, how exactly were you brought to justice? Walk me through the final arrest, the charges that ultimately stuck, and the legal outcome of your trials.
The federal authorities busted me on May 11th, 1980, for running that massive interstate narcotics ring. Facing a lifetime in prison and certain death on the streets, I made the choice to talk to the FBI. I signed a deal with the Department of Justice and entered the Federal Witness Protection Program. I took the stand and testified against my former associates. My testimony led to roughly 50 convictions, including sending my captain Paul Vario and Jimmy Burke away to prison for the rest of their lives.
What's the craziest rumor ever told about you? And what part of your story has been exaggerated the most?
Well, because of the book Wise Guy and the movie Goodfellas, people think every single day was a cinematic, high-stakes thrill ride. The media and Hollywood definitely sensationalized the glamour of it. In reality, a lot of the mob life was incredibly mundane, messy, and filled with pathetic, small-time scams just to pay off gambling debts or cover the next drug buy.
What is the biggest misconception people have about your life?
The biggest misconception is that I was a cold-blooded killer. I have always maintained that I never personally murdered anyone. I was a hustler, a schemer, a robber, and the money man. Now, did I witness executions? Yes, probably around 10 of them. Did I help dig the holes and bury the bodies? Absolutely. I did a lot of terrible things and broke a lot of heads, but I never pulled the trigger on a hit.
What would surprise people most about your ordinary human side?
Probably just how regular of a family man I tried to be on the surface. Despite the madness, I loved my kids, Greg and Gina. When we had to go into hiding in the witness protection program, I was just trying to live a quiet, ordinary life in a nondescript neighborhood like a regular schnook, doing normal domestic chores and trying to blend into the suburbs.
When, where, and how did you pass away?
I passed away on June 12th, 2012, at West Hills Hospital in Los Angeles, California. I was 69 years old. After surviving decades in the mob and the crosshairs of hitmen, it was actually my health that took me out. Years of heavy smoking caught up with me, and I suffered complications from a heart attack, passing away peacefully in the hospital, surrounded by family.
Was your downfall caused more by your own flaws or by the world changing around you?
It was definitely my own flaws, mixed with greed. I couldn't resist the allure of the fast money in the drug game, even when I knew the rules and the dangers. But the world was changing too. The FBI was getting incredibly smart, using RICO laws and wiretaps to dismantle the families. The old-school mafia structure couldn't hold up under that kind of pressure, and neither could I.
What past regrets did you carry with you to the end? If you could erase one decision from your life, would you? Or was it necessary to become who you were?
It took me a very long time to forgive myself for turning state's evidence and becoming what the streets call a rat. Initially, I carried a massive amount of remorse for breaking that code, but looking back at the end, I realized I put away some truly horrible people who killed for absolutely no reason at all, and I likely saved lives by doing it. You live by the sword, you die by the sword, and I had to do what was necessary to survive.
What scared you more? Getting caught, losing power, or being forgotten?
In those final moments before I flipped, it was absolutely the fear of getting killed by my own people. I wasn't afraid of jail, and I wasn't afraid of being forgotten. I was terrified of being whacked by Jimmy Burke and ending up in a shallow hole in the ground like all the others.
When you look back now, do you see yourself as the villain, the hero, or something in between?
I sure wasn't a hero. I was a hoodlum, a criminal, and a drug dealer who caused a lot of pain. But by stepping up and putting those dangerous crews behind bars, I think I landed somewhere in that messy gray area in between. I did what I had to do to survive, and I let the world judge the rest.
Henry, do you have any closing remarks about the interview or the stories you've shared that you would like to share with our listeners before we sign off?
Yeah, Calvin, I'd just tell the folks listening that the glamorous gangster life you see on the movie screens is a trap. It looks like diamond rings and easy money, but it always ends in a prison cell or a casket. It ain't worth it.
And that wraps up another conversation from Beyond the Grave. Thanks for joining us on the Headstones and Microphones podcast. Remember, do better with the life you have been given and choose to do good in this life. Please help spread the word by sharing and following the pod.